looks like we've got a full house without any apologies for absence. Are there any declarations of interest? Have you all had a chance to review the minutes and the actions of the previous meeting? Are there any corrections or concerns? Any more? Thank you very much. We haven't got any participation, see? Can we take a look at the summary of internal controls and assurance SICA report? Would I hand over to Phil?
Yes, happy to do that. So if I'm not going to talk through the papers in a great deal of detail, but I'll touch upon them briefly and then answer any questions at the end. So if I start on page 21 of the pack that's before you, starting with garage rents, which is essentially an income-based audit. This is an important audit because it contributes towards the council's overall goal of financial stewardship. It's an important income stream. Two recommendations that have been raised in respect of this review. One of them is in relation to procedures that were not followed, and the other was in relation to credits which were observed in relation to the accounts.
Chairman, do you want us to ask questions as it goes along or at the end?
As it goes along. Yep.
I will pause at the end of each of the reports in order to allow you to ask questions. I'm not surprised that there would be questions in relation to each of these reports. Broadly speaking, there was good practice in relation to this important income stream with the policies being detailed. It was very clear what should be taking place. It was just unfortunate that in relation to the sample, we observed some instances where that was not so. We did, however, engage with management and there was constructive dialogue. And as you can see on page 22, you'll see that we've incorporated their responses into the report and they have committed to implementing corrective action. And I will stop and ask if anyone has any questions in relation to this first audit report.
Yes. How can it be, this is perhaps not a question for you, but for an officer, but I don't see how we can have credit amounts of as much as £1,000 against an individual rent.
Jeff, can I take that one, please? Yes. Some of the people that rent the garage from us like to pay up front.
Really?
Yeah, so some like to pay for the year, which obviously does.
£1 to £1,000.
Yeah, I mean we have set up a report as it shows in the audit there. We have set up a report to kind of keep an eye on it. Yeah, some people do like to pay up front.
Okay, thank you. May I ask another question?
You certainly can. I've got a few as well.
Thank you. As I understand it, one of the responses that you had to the deviations from what you would regard as proper management was some managers work differently to others. Is that correct?
I mean, it's included in the report. That was what was said at the time. It is a matter that I believe is being taken forward, as you can see there through.
It seems to me to be an absolutely invalid excuse even. But how does this generally affect the arrears process? This sort of deviation from what is regarded as a reasonable.
So it's important to add on that we did not perform a full extrapolation exercise during the course of this review, and I would imagine that how things should be taken going forward would depend upon management taking the observations that we've made here, to their ultimate conclusion by deciding an appropriate course of action when they look at root causes and the extent to which deviance is noted.
Okay, thank you.
Is that right if I come in that one? Yeah. I found that a strange comment, to be honest with you, because there's only one manager that oversees the collection of the rent, and that manager's been in place for a number of years. If anything, I think there's deviation or there has been a training issue within the small team of officers that collects the rent for garages.
Right.
We've kind of alluded to it in the report there. There has been a training issue of a particular officer who we are working with to kind of bring up to the standard that we expect to be. It's a team of 3 officers that deal with it. We split all those garage accounts between 3 people, and then one maybe not performing as we would like to has quite a big impact. So.
Because I mean, as I understand it, the normal after a certain number of months, you repossess the garage.
Yeah, it's a really straightforward process in terms of garage collection, a lot different to rent. So
Okay, so
we're aware of it, and there's a plan in place to improve that.
Just to kind of like add on to that comment as well. So this is exactly the reason that internal audit takes place. We worked well with management during the course of this review. We've made observations. They've taken effective action as a result of the observations we've made. That's working as it should be.
Can I just clarify, sorry, the point from yours. So when you're saying, it's a bit of a strange comment, so the garage managers, we're talking about there's just one team and there's a number of garage officers, so to speak, who work with other teams. There's not like different companies doing this for us. I'm not aware.
It's one manager, 3 officers that do it.
Yeah, I only had one question, which was how many garages do we manage and how many garages have credit amounts over £1,000, which I've got an answer for. But so I was surprised by the number. We have 5,392 garages.
We actually have more garages than that, but they're the number that are occupied.
Right. Those. Oh, right. That's gracious. How many are unoccupied?
Well, we have a occupancy level of about 73% at present. So, yeah, and there's work underway to look at driving up that occupancy level further.
We've got something like 7,000 garages.
Yeah.
And the response says we only have 3 accounts that are over £1,000. 2 have been refunded, and there's 1 that you're taking steps to deal with. So it's tiny numbers.
Yeah.
And I did ask what CHCK meant.
Yes,
I could have guessed if I stuck an E in the middle.
It's an abbreviation used on our management system to show that a management check has been carried out on that account.
Okay. Are there any more questions? Oh yes, Councillor Duras.
Can I just ask, just to get my head around, the £1,000 prepayment, is that a free? I know you said they do pay for a thing, but is that sort of £20 a week for 50 weeks, or is it 6 months, or is it more than a year? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but certainly I can look into that.
It'd be just useful. I mean, I'm not
Put it into context.
I'm not apportioning any blame or any criticism or anything like that. But it's just interesting to know the scale of it and whether it's just effectively one transaction that was made and got overlooked, or whether it was a number going forward.
Certainly something we can feedback on.
Yeah, take an action on that. Yeah, I mean that's why I was poking around the numbers as well.
Yeah.
Okay, are we happy to move on to the next SICA report?
Fabulous.
Keep going, Philip.
Thank you very much. So MTFS, which is again an important financial responsibility topic. Again, sustainability, financial sustainability is an important thing that all internal auditors at councils are looking at increasingly. It serves as a cornerstone for the borough's financial planning, and typically we'll cover things such as the robustness of revenue and expenditure projections, risk management strategies, viability, and that kind of thing. Overall level of assurance in respect of it is very good. Management interacted with us on an iterative basis very helpfully throughout the course of the review. As per page 25 of the document that you've got in front of you, you'll notice that we did raise a recommendation in respect of a gap where, in terms of 4 streams actions had been developed, but they weren't necessarily associated, as we would like to see, with a firm and accountable set of actions, which would be attributable to key officers. Management again provided a very reasonable answer and said that going forward, this is something that would be covered off from Q3 forward. And I will stop at that juncture and ask if anyone has any questions.
Again, Chair, this may be for an officer. I note that these plans, these delivery plans, I am on the right thing, aren't I? Yes, the delivery plans that are for projected savings are to be implemented by Q3. My question is, will these plans progressions be reported to audit as well as finance and resources? Because I think there ought to be.
Thank you, Councillor Burney. So in response, the implementation at Q3 is the reporting of the actions that are being taken against those particular savings. At the moment, the intention is to report that through to the scrutiny and cabinet process as part of quarterly financial reporting. If it's something that's of interest to this committee, we could bring it that outlines progress, if that's something that this committee wanted. But to assure members, there would be a scrutiny process on those plans via overview and scrutiny, and also cabinet.
I think I think in scrutiny, in my experience, you'll be updating them on what the state of the plans are, but what we really like to see here is what the actual plans are, I think, in my view. Right. Others may disagree.
No, I asked the same question. So.
I disagree with Councillor Burnley, because it should go to finance and they will scrutinise whether we're hitting the plan or not. So really, I don't think it should bung up this with more information on a commercial strategy that if they don't hit the plans, we'll know it at finance and resources, and that will be where we'll report to cabinet about it. So I don't really think most that should come here. But
yeah, I mean that's I had a similar question to you, Councillor Burnley, and I came to the same conclusion. I proposed an action that we ask the Finance and Resources OSC that they should see these delivery plans and scrutinise them, and you run through that scrutiny process. So, and I got a response.
So if I can just add, I think with any action plans, they'll be embedded within the services. Those services are then subject to internal audit scrutiny. So there would be another role there, I think, for internal audit to check on the delivery. And of course, then any findings there would be reported through to this committee. So there would be a route if there was an issue, I think, that those action plans weren't being implemented.
Okay, thank you.
Are we happy? Yeah. So there was an action there to alert Finance and Resources OSC.
Oh, sorry. I think, yes, we are still on the map. Page 27, the implementation timetable, it's a sort of a 7-month implementation. I'm not sure whether is that the best use of time, because it seems to me it would probably be better if it was in a shorter period of time.
Oh, have you jumped to the next report?
Yeah.
Sorry, you jumped to the next report, Councillor. Hang on to that. Hold on to that.
Oh yes, sorry, apologies.
No worries. We'll let Phil introduce it, and then.
I mean, this barely needs much introduction to yourselves. Essentially, it is by and large the very nature of your role here today. So it's governance and risk management. It is one of the cornerstone reviews that we undertake during the course of the year. We have worked closely with the council over the last 12 months, and the overall risk management and governance arrangements have tightened. There remain 2 recommendations that have been raised here, but that's mostly a function of the time that we undertook the reviews. And I shan't talk through the recommendations in any detail because I believe they are self-evident and obvious. And I will throw open to any questions again.
So Doris.
I'm completely lost on which one we're on now.
Page 27.
Are we on the executive summary?
No, that was my first question, is why is this called executive summary?
I can answer that if you like. So every report has an executive summary. So, and that's not just ourselves that do that, that's every set of internal auditors that you will ever work with has an executive summary. And the idea is that it is a helicopter eye view, essentially described as the helicopter floating above the burning field so you can see where the fire is burning. It allows you in a one-page manner to get a sense of the key outputs in relation to the audit. So the key findings are there, the best practice, and the overall score on the door, as it were, as well as the key risk and goals of the audit in the first place. And that is the executive summary. So every report has one. It doesn't detail the recommendations, that is on the management action plan section, which kind of follows on. You don't have the full detail of each of the audit reports presented to you here. However, in the event that there are limited assurance reports, they are presented to you in full.
Okay. I think it was just the positioning.
Sure.
It confused me, and it's quite easy to do.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
I'm not going to disagree. So there is an oddity in that it is worded executive summary here as well.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a turn of phrase that's particularly helpful for this particular forum, because executive is something that's used by this council in a very limited sense. So, for example, you've got a chief executive officer, and that is pretty much it. But for all the various other types of organisations we provide services to, that is a much more pertinent term, and I would say some councils it's freely used as well.
Yeah, I'm just generally used to seeing executive summary at the beginning of it rather than halfway through.
So that is, again, is a function of this particular report. So this is a progress report pulling all of the documents together.
Sure.
If you could see the individual audit reports, you would see it is indeed at the start. It is page 2 of the audit report after the front cover.
Okay, so where did I get to? I think we're on the map.
Yeah.
Yeah, are we? Yes, good. Okay, hurrah. 7 months
Okay, if I can
after all that.
I'll respond to that. Thank you, Councillor Zeres. So there is quite a long lead-in period or rather a long period for the training, and that's because the actual process, I think, to get us from the revised corporate plan through to the revised strategic risks, which follow through from the corporate plan, is a fairly long one. So the corporate plan would be revised. I believe that work is expected to sort of commence in earnest in January of next year. Once that's been finalised and agreed by the administration, there'll then be a session with this group, Cabinet and others, to determine the strategic risks, and there'll be training delivered to the people involved in that as part of that. Once we've actually approved new strategic risks as an organisation, that would then need to be rolled out to managers such as myself in the corporate leadership team. I wouldn't expect that to sort of happen until early in the next financial year. So when you start to put all those stages together, you get essentially a 7-month period. I won't be doing 100% training, risk management training for that whole 7-month period. It will be spread out. And we'll do that in collaboration with TIA, but that's the reason for the protracted timescale.
I know it's probably nitpicking, but it probably would have been, for clarity, to me anyway, it would have training to be delivered during the period X after the creation of the corporate plan. It just puts it in that timeline. So, yeah. But it's only an observation.
No, I had a similar question. I question, will the training be delivered in time for the workshop? I was more worried about the sequence, because it seems that we're going to review the risks in March, and the training was probably happening a bit later than that.
No, the training will be done in the correct order, which would be, I would say, at the start of the process before that review has then taken place, to enable you to undertake the review. So that would be the intention.
Brilliant. So we're not going in blind.
No, that's right.
Okay.
If I can progress on to page 32, assuming there are no further questions in relation to that particular review. So page 32 is progress against the annual plan. It's very similar to where we were at this time last year. There are 3 final reports, a number of reports that are at draft stage. I believe at least one of those came out final today, I think. And then a number where field work is ongoing. I have no particular concerns in relation to delivery in year, given that this is pretty much where we were for the last 2 years, and actually given that we started this year in a state of purdah, before then going into the summer holidays, I'm pretty confident that all of those audits will fall due in a timely manner. However, it is important that the remaining audits do get booked in and firmly agreed, and I had a conversation with Fiona earlier on today about doing just that. Yep. And that's all I propose to say in relation to that particular topic before moving on to recommendations. However, I see there is a question.
Yes, if I may. I see under plan preventative estate maintenance, which I assume also includes council houses. Am I correct?
Yes, it will do, yes.
Thank you. I can't understand why it's at the end of the list, because I think everybody in the council by now is aware that we have serious problems with the maintenance issue of council houses. I could quote the leader of the council, for example, who said exactly that to me the other night. And I can't understand why it's right at the end of your list and is, you know, at the stage of to be commenced. I would have thought that it was a matter of some importance to get our teeth into this as soon as possible.
So I'm happy to take first crack at providing response. So I don't believe the positioning here is a mark of how important it is. I don't disagree with you in respect of it being a priority to this particular council. If you look at the reviews, complaints and concerns that are raised in respect of this council, you will very much see that it is a topic that is highlighted as an area of concern with a degree of frequency. I believe that it's placed here largely as a result of both a combination of third-party assurance that's been provided in particular in respect of this particular area, and there has been a fair degree of that over the last kind of like 12 months, and also I think a degree of wanting to bed in new systems and arrangements before we went in and provided the assurance in respect of those particular systems. But I will move over to, I will defer to Fiona, who may want to add additional commentary.
So I think Bill has raised the relevant points really in respect of this. I think the timing of this audit in Q4 of the current financial year will allow proper testing of any new processes that have been brought in to provide assurance.
Do these include this OPSL?
That's with reference to
which is supposed to be delivered by the 30th of November.
This is, you're referring to, this is to the list of risks that have been identified.
Okay.
That's part of a separate piece of work.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Will it be coming to us or does it go elsewhere?
The list of risks, Councillor Burney, it will be circulated to Audit Committee. That was one of the actions from the last meeting. It's outstanding, but it will be sent through to you.
Thank you.
Apologies, it wasn't one of the actions. It was something that needed to be circulated to committee. Apologies.
You suggest, Councillor Burney, are you suggesting an action that we bring forward the planned and preventive estates maintenance audit?
Well, I think that it needs to be fully addressed ASAP, actually, but obviously the auditor may have different ideas.
Well, not
I take his point that putting it at the end of the list is just coincidental, as it were.
That's the way it looks to me, and it also takes account of that there is transformation work happening in that area. So perhaps if we could take an action, get a response from the housing team as to could it be brought forward? Yes, no. Is it in the right place so that a full and fair audit will be conducted at a time when it's ready?
From our perspective, obviously happy to do the audit whenever, but I would say it is really important that we have the new systems in place for a period of time in order to be able to derive an appropriate sampling framework to select whether things are going to plan or not. Otherwise, we run the risk of auditing against the previous systems rather than the current ones.
I take, that's a very good point. We also do have the opportunity in January, February next year to relook at this list and think about priorities, maybe resequencing or moving stuff around, or maybe even adding areas. But if we can get a response on that, that'd be good. I've got a few questions. Sorry, Councillor Dewars? Sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with you. On
Oh,
what you said. I think, as Fiona said, it's new things, new systems come into place.
yes.
And as you said, so with 8, you know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I only had two further questions. Oh,
No, we were both indicating, but Graham indicated first, so
Stick your hand up, and then I'll see you.
I mean, I am a little bit concerned, and I may be speaking out of turn, so apologies. I'm a little bit concerned that there seems to be a potential for a level of duplication in terms of the auditing, if you like, because we're getting auditing here and we're discussing it, but at the same time, the auditing is almost being done at the scrutiny committees. And I think we need perhaps to think a little more about the division of scrutiny and audit, because I just get the feeling, and there was a reference, or there will be a reference on page 34, it's a recommendation acceptable to SPAY OSC. I'm not sure that whether that's right for us to be saying that, because SPAY and the other overview and scrutiny committees have their own set of parameters and their own responsibilities, and it's a question almost perhaps sometimes of which comes first, the scrutiny or the audit. And Philip is going to tell us which comes first. But do you see where I'm coming from? And I'm just anxious in terms of also officer time as well. But I'll stop there.
Oh, it's a question I raised, so I'll let Phil go first.
Well, firstly, can I say that is a fabulous question and one that is very live across the country at large. The division between scrutiny and audit is one that all organisations should be cited on. And make sure that audit don't inadvertently stray into scrutiny. And there is a lot of guidance by professional bodies about the importance of keeping audit distinct from scrutiny. And that goes as far as what you call the audit committee. You know, there are very firm rules that there is guidance available on gov.uk and so on and so forth in relation to that. I think it is, if you stand back, quite clear the distinction between them both. Essentially, scrutiny is about, you know, the aims of the council and holding to account in respect of direction, and audit is that the big benefit that us as internal auditors bring is objective assurance. And I don't want to go into too much detail in relation to the difference between second and third line and potentially fourth line, depending on who you're speaking to, assurance. But there is an added value through having objective assurance that might not necessarily be received through the forms of assurance that you might get at a scrutiny committee. So there is a light overlap between the two, but I would always urge you know, a very careful eye and an ongoing oversight in respect of what is the purview of scrutiny and what is the purview of audit. And that is a topic that we'll no doubt bring out in the training.
Thank you.
Catherine?
Yes, if I can just add to that, it's a very timely question because, as members of the committee might know, there is a review going on of our scrutiny function at present across the council. I don't know whether you've all been invited to give any thoughts to that as yet.
I was on the phone call yesterday morning.
There we go. Have the rest of the committee had any? No. It might just have gone to the scrutiny committee members, but I'll pick that up with our monitoring officer. But anyway, so there is a review and we've got the Centre for Public Scrutiny helping support us in that. And part of the outcome of that will be a bit of updated and further guidance and information so that everybody's really clear about the split of those roles. So more to come on that.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question? Absolutely. I'm going to press on with these questions anyway, because I'll explain why asked these questions about.
You're only halfway down page one.
Sorry?
You're only halfway down page one of your questions.
Well, yes, I'm going to ask them anyway. So we've got waste management. What is under discussion within waste management on page 32? So, we've got the list of...
Again, I don't really want to derail the Audit Committee, but essentially the key factors that are being addressed are the exact scope of the review. So whether it should be a follow-up of the previous review, which was a limited assurance review, which is what it was originally placed in the plan as being. However, I believe that an internal senior member of the management team has requested that additional assurance is provided. And the current thinking is that additional assurance outside of the scope of the previous review, which provided limited assurance, should instead be provided as a potential topic for next year, rather than obscure the very considerable issues that were raised in the last review.
No, thanks for clarifying. It's just when I saw that comment. Is there something contentious?
I don't believe it's contentious. Again, I spoke with Fiona before this Audit Committee, and the plan is that it will be resolved tomorrow.
And then that leads on to my next question is, are you on course to deliver the planned audits? It's quite a long list.
I kind of provided an answer to that a little while ago.
Yes, you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So you don't need any support or
at this moment, only from Fiona, and again, I had a conversation with her ahead of this audit committee. Perhaps if we were to have a pre-meet before the next audit committee, I could give a little bit more detail in respect of where we're at with respect of individual audits, because again, I don't want to consume large amounts of time.
No, Councillor Duras is more.
And also, it's really not that exciting.
No, that's good. And then I did ask a few questions about the SPAY OSC. Are they happy with some of the recommendations? The main reason I ask those questions from an audit point of view, as a previous internal auditor, is whenever I see something like KPIs being generated or suggested process changes, they are valid audit sort of linkages, and sort of just making sure that the scrutiny committee's aware of the activity is to me a valid question. But you're right, there are some things where I could be asking a question, but it's a clarification. May sort of stray outside audit, but I think these ones are just.
I believe that you've been provided with answers to those queries. I haven't received a copy of them myself, but hopefully they answer your concerns. But if you wanted to have a meeting outside of this audit committee to go through anything in more detail, more than happy to do that.
I think that they're beyond what you're working on. They're obviously questions for the officers in the different areas. So, yeah. Right. Shall we move on? Any more questions? I'm looking around the room. I would only last point is, I know I asked for a progress against all recommendations issued in the year to date as requested. I see there's at the back of the report that's been actioned, and I can see there's recent actions that have been recent recommendations that have been raised, and I freely admit I'm not entirely sure I've asked for the right thing, because they look like a repeat probably from a database of some of the actions that are higher up in the report.
So if you would wish to clarify what it is that you would like, more than happy to.
So I think I wanted to see all the extant actions that haven't been closed. If your report provides those, then maybe I could have it as a separate, not presented in your slide pack, but as a separate report, because I just want to see if there's a backlog of issues.
So you are provided with all recommendations of priority 1 or 2 in the report that haven't been closed.
Yes,
That's already there. That's in the previous section.
it
I
is.
think what you're looking for is a complete list, is that
I
correct?
think that's right,
So
Councillor.
you wish to include priority 3 recommendations? That more than happy to.
Not in your presentation. When you come back next time
Okay.
to present SICA reports, I think what I realise now is rather than you present all I think as a separate action, it's just a report to us of all open actions. But
Okay.
not-
You want
not-
that to be provided outside of the audit committee?
Yeah, because otherwise it will just clutter up the slide pack.
Okay, it's literally just this with some additional priority 3 actions, but that's fine.
I thought that you were after what actions had been suggested and had not yet been completed.
That's right, yeah.
That makes
That
sense.
is what is here, the actions that have been raised that haven't been closed down. So, and that includes actions where management have given us some assurance that things have been closed down, but where we haven't necessarily received the evidence or tested to ensure that the root cause has been addressed. They remain on this list until we're happy that that the action, if we did the audit again, that the same issue would not arise.
Right.
Chair, sorry to come back in again. I think that we need to draw a distinction between the audit function and the interest function. And it sounds, with the greatest of respect to you as the chair, that what you're asking for is something of interest.
It is.
Rather than of audit. And I'm aware that our internal auditors are contracted to us for a fee, and if we spend too much time or if we involve them in too much time for interest, then that will be reflected quite naturally in their fee. So in terms of financial care, I think we need to, and I say this with great respect to you, but we need to be careful what we're asking for.
Yeah, that's why I wanted it stripped out of the report, because I realised. Yeah, Councillor Vernon?
In effect, I think this could be a very useful exercise, which shouldn't take too much time because he's already done the work and knows it's just a question of drawing it together. But the point is that if there were, for example, God forbid, a lot of suggestions that hadn't yet been put into effect, or that management said were going to be put into effect and had not actually happened. This is useful, I would have thought, for our committee, because inherently that's a criticism of management if it's an extensive list, which I'm sure it won't be.
That's what I wasn't, I had no sight of. That's why I asked the question.
Is that fair?
So, firstly, it's not particularly large, I can tell you that for a fact. Otherwise, I would have drawn attention to it. You do get that actually at the year end anyway, as part of the annual head of internal audit opinion. So you get an analysis of that, not just in year, but also a comparator against the previous year as well. However, more than happy to provide it. You're right, it would not take long. And your point about asking internal auditors to do lots of things is quite right. So there are actually multiple impacts. So it might result in a fee. In this case, actually, it's going to be like a trainee doing it for like half an hour because it's already on your portal. However, you do need to tread carefully around that because although we're not at that position, I am aware of internal auditors literally withdrawing from contracts because they feel they're being asked too onerous, it's just too onerous performing the function at some organisations. And that's a really difficult situation to be in because you're contractually tied to the rates that you've agreed. So then you're faced with either I argue in relation to the days and how long this particular task is going to take, or I just go, actually, walk away from it. And I have done that with some clients in the past. I'm not close to doing it with this council, but it is something that you should be aware of.
No, I take both points on board, because I originally asked the question because I was just wondering, we were seeing these individual SICA reports with the recommendations, and I just wanted to know, is there a big backlog? And the answer appears probably not, but I did ask the question, so I thought tacking a list onto the report might help. And now seeing it, I realise, oh, this is an extract from a database.
Sorry, just worth probably adding as well. So for priority 3 actions, a lower threshold is required in order to evidence that the recommendation has been actioned. That's something that we've agreed with the previous Audit Committee, and it's also in common in keeping with every organisation. And the reason for that is, so for priority 1, you need to undertake substantive testing again to close it down. You probably don't want to be doing that for all your priority 3 actions because it isn't a good use of auditors' time or management's time within the council. They will be tearing their hair out if you go to them and say, well, this priority 3 action was raised. Can you provide me evidence of your transactions over the last year in order to validate what is effectively not much beyond a best practice recommendation. So they actually tend to be closed down much more quickly than the priority 1s and 2s because you only need the management assertion from a senior level. You need it documented, it's not on a telephone, but it's much easier to close down than priority 1 and 2s because management will say, yeah, I've done that. Now, whether they have or not, you'll find out when you go back and re-perform the testing, whether the audit comes around again. In the event that it doesn't, it is in our database, and we will sometimes draw attention in the audit report saying, management provided assurance last time that this had been closed down. It doesn't seem to have been the case. And sometimes that in and of itself will tip the audit into limited assurance. Yeah, absolutely.
From a 3 to a 4.
Yeah, that's right. So,
Catherine.
Yeah, just wanted to add to that, that there is another layer of assurance within senior management that Fiona reports to the senior leadership team on a quarterly basis, again, on all of the audits past and those that are outstanding, and we review and discuss that and ensure that if we have any concerns that they're addressed. So just to add that.
I think it was just Councillor Burney and I, possibly. We're just wondering, is there a big backlog? And if there isn't, then there's probably not such a big issue, but a one-off summary for us, for the committee, just to see.
yeah,
I'm not going to pick my way through.
I'll provide one by the end of the week and send it through to Fiona. She can look through it.
Thank you very much. And then, yeah, if you strip this out of the report and you just return to the report format as it was, that'll be fine for me. Unless anybody else wants to see all these blue rows. No. Right. Thank you. Shall we move on? Right. Moving on to the strategic risk registers, and thank you. And as punishment, we get 2 of them.
Thank you for that introduction, Chair. So yes, as punishment, you get an update on 2 quarters worth of strategic risks. Quarter 1 for the current financial year and quarter 2. Now, we would normally bring these reports quarter by quarter. There has been a delay in reporting this time around, so apologies for that. But I thought it was important that you could still see the position at quarter 1 and then also the updated position at quarter 2. The covering report to those strategic risk register updates just really highlights where there's been a movement in terms of risk scoring for our identified strategic risks. So at quarter 1, there was a movement from quarter 4 of 22-23 against our strategic risks, which is around the delivery of place shaping and regeneration ambitions. The movement was a reduction to a risk score of 6, previously 9. And the rationale for that reduction in the risk score was really about perceived progress on mitigation activities against that risk, which covered the whole scope of activities that are outlined in the risk register, but also more specifically about the partial lifting of the planning moratorium related to Chiltern's Beechwood. So that was the rationale really for that reduction. When we get to Q2, there's been one movement in terms of delivery of safe and good quality homes. So the risk score at Q2 has actually increased to 8, previously a score of 4. And that's really in relation to the consequence score against this risk following various pieces of legislation that have come into force. And that's the reason for that risk score being increased from what it was previously. So you've got 2 risk registers covering Q1 and Q2. That's been completed by senior members of the organisation. If there's any queries that are raised in respect to the content of that, I'm happy to field as much of that as I can.
Right, 2 strategic risk registers. Do we have any questions?
I had one just on the delivery of safe and good quality homes. I can see there's already been a question you've asked, but the answer that came back about it being difficult to quantify the additional costs of the changes in the Social Housing Regulations Act. I'm just wondering whether there's any idea when you might become aware of what those additional costs might be, what the timescales on that matter.
I think I'd have to repeat Darren Welsh, our Strategic Director from Housing and Properties comments. It is difficult. Members will know we're constantly working on those at the moment. There have been broader discussions around the housing revenue account, its financial sustainability and the costs and income that we're experiencing in that area. So honestly, I don't think I can add much to the response that's been given previously. It is being worked on, and as we have more concrete figures, we obviously would report them through to members. So it's sort of a slightly non-answer for you, but it's really to re-emphasise the position that's been put forward by the relevant strategic director.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's the same question. It's going to be painful. Right. I guess you've seen my questions and I've got responses. I don't feel, unless people want me to, I can walk through them all, but there's quite a few questions there. I think the biggie for me is what's being done in the near term, page 73, what will be done in the near term to manage the current projected pressure on the HRA account of circa 400k 23-24.
I can offer some comments on that, Chair. So the financial pressures on the HRA, they're reported quarterly through to overview and scrutiny and through to Cabinet. There are significant cost pressures, as members will be aware, in the housing revenue account. We've got rising costs. Service have been very proactive in terms of looking at their expenditure. There's a balance there because we have ongoing demand from our tenants and from our leaseholders in terms of works that are undertaken. That obviously needs to be carried out within a finite financial envelope. So there is a lot of work going on to look at the work that we're doing to make sure it's as efficient and as cost effective as possible. And alongside that, we're also making sure that we are actually maximising our income recovery as far as the housing landlord function is concerned. So where we should be recovering costs, we are doing that. Billing is going out correctly and so on. So all aspects really that you'd expect a service to look at have been considered. The worst case scenario really is that you reach the end of the financial year and you still have a pressure against those budgets. The housing revenue account does have its own revenue reserves, and we had to utilise some of those last year because we had cost-related pressures. Indeed, and it was an unusual year. It's not something that we've really had to rely on before. We take every other action before we try and apply reserves to sort of financial position out, but it is there if it does need to be utilised. And then clearly we're also undertaking planning for future years to make sure that we can manage within the financial envelope that's available to the landlord function. So I think those are my comments really in respect of that question.
On that question of reserves, I'm sorry if it's not entirely germane. As I recall, we were left with 150k only in the HRA reserves, but the expectation was that normally you would be able to put 390k towards that on an annual basis. That seemed to me to be very small beer in both cases by comparison with the drawdown that had been made to balance things off.
I can offer some comments on that. So, well remembered on the 150k, that was the year-end balance last year for one revenue reserve within the housing revenue account. We do have a number of revenue reserves relating to the housing revenue account. One of those is the working balance. That's close to 3 million. That's very much still there. Okay. We also have another revenue reserve, which is around 4.5 million. So we do have more than the 150k available should it be needed. So I hope there's some assurance on that point.
Phew.
Right.
Councillor Doris?
Yeah, I just caught my eye on page 54, and I don't think Fiona's going to be able to answer this one. I'd be amazed if you do. Failure to achieve the CEE statement and the risk description. We do not plan in or deliver action early enough to ensure achievement of the CEE statement. Now, given that we've done a climate emergency statement, that strikes me as being a little negative in suggesting that we may not be able to do it, because I would have thought that we would have made every effort to achieve that statement.
I'll offer some, I'll offer some general comments, I think, on the risk description and the sort of the comment that perhaps it's been phrased in a negative way. I think that section is really just trying to capture what is the risk. I don't think it's saying that actually we will not be able to plan or deliver. I think it's saying this is a risk for us as an authority that we don't do this. And then the subsequent content is then sort of showing how we mitigate against that risk coming to pass. So those are my comments really as to how that's been phrased. I think most of the risks are phrased probably in a negative way. For example, financial resilience, I'm pretty sure there's similar sort of tone in terms of how it's described.
But it is the very nature of the risk, isn't it, that if you don't do it. But it just, that one particularly, given the great interest in climate change, that caught my eye.
Catherine?
If I could just add to that, yeah, if you just go down a little bit further and it talks about the evidence that the risk is being managed, hopefully that gives you the assurance. That's talking about the things that have been done, such as the strategy and an action plan created and implemented and the rest.
Yeah.
Does have a low mitigated score, so the feeling is, well, it is a risk, but it's not. I must admit, I have general comments about the way the risks are presented and how they're described. I'm sure I'll become this more popular in the risk workshop, but yeah, I mean, it's a good framework, but I'm not entirely, as a previous program director, I do find it's hard to see how the mitigating actions contribute to what is described as the risk, and therefore, as a manager, you could see, oh, if I do ABC, the risk will go away. I find the information is presented at the moment doesn't give me that.
Chair, I can take that, and I think similar points have been made at a previous meeting, and that has been fed back. But we'll do that. We'll look at again the way that the information is actually laid out in the risk register to see if we can make that clearer. I'm sure it's possible to do that.
Shall we move on to? I mean, I found a few typos.
If you let me know those out of the meeting, then I'll make sure that those are corrected going forward.
Everybody's rolling their eyes at the back of the room there.
Appreciate the feedback.
Right. Should we move on to, unless there's any other questions on the strategic risk register, we'll move on to the Treasury Management Mid-Year Performance Report.
I'll take that one as well, Chair, thank you. So this report is one of the statutory reports that we've got to bring before yourselves and also Cabinet that reports on the performance of the Council's Treasury management function. So I think the key message I want to come across from this report really is that the Council's investment performance is very strong at the moment, so that's the investment of our cash balances. You've heard that from me before at this meeting. If you attend overview and scrutiny, you'll also have heard a similar message coming through in the financial reports. So that's the first key message really to take away from a report that has a lot of financial information in it. The second one is that We have a series of indicators for the council that other local authorities have to have as well. And what the report is demonstrating is that we are at compliant levels for all of those indicators in respect of our Treasury management activity and our capital expenditure. So that's the other key point really from this report. There's 3 appendices that come with this report, and again, this is statutory information that we're required to convey to you. The first of those is that as at the 30th of September, who were the counterparties that we were actually investing the council's cash balances with? So that's Appendix A. Appendix B, at the same point in time, shows you a full list of available counterparties to us based on the credit management, the credit ratings that are specified in our Treasury management strategy. And then Appendix C has a number of different indicators on Treasury management and capital activity that, again, we have a statutory obligation to report to you. So if anyone's read through those indicators in detail, very happy to take their questions on them or any other areas of this report.
Just a detail. I see that we use Link Asset Services as an advisory body. Could you just tell me, do I get the impression that's part of the Treasury itself?
That's correct, Chair. No, they're not part of Treasury as in Her Majesty's Treasury. They are a private organisation. They specialise in Treasury management advisory services to the public sector, very sort of widely used by local authorities.
Is that right?
That's right. They provide us with advice, but clearly investment decisions are one specified in our Treasury management strategy for one for members,
Sure.
and then executed by
what they
officers.
do. I'm just wondering if there were other people in the field, as it were, whether they...
It's quite a narrow field in terms of providers. So there's
Right.
Link, and there's also another company called Arlen Close. They're the other key competitor, really. It's quite a narrow field. It's quite a narrow field of providers.
So it's just a question of how other authorities use them, so they're probably okay.
And I will say on that point, we've got quite a long-standing relationship with Link. I've worked with Link in other organisations I've worked with.
Right.
I've always been very impressed by the quality of their advice. But you know, were that to change at any point, we'd clearly look again at that contract.
No reason to suggest that. I'm just interested in who they were, how they were picked.
Well, I mean, ask that question. I mean, because were they subject to procurement process?
They will be subject to a procurement process, as with any council contract of over a particular threshold value. So there has been a competitive process. We do keep it under review as well.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, basically, most of these companies are just betting whether interest rates are going to go up and down, and crystal ball if we tell you the lottery numbers. But there we are. I'm just going to, and you probably, you probably know this, but we have counterparty limits for, say, NatWest and Royal Bank of Scotland, but they're the same company, as you probably know, and Lloyds and Bank of Scotland are the same company. So, but then again, if they were to go bust, as we know, one of them got bust, they get bailed out. So, but do they? I'm just thinking, would they offer different interest rates?
They can do, depending on the product.
Yeah.
It depends what we're looking to invest in. NatWest are on, they're partly, they're up the council's bankers. So
Yes, they are, yeah. I was there when they...
And that generally, because we tend to have some money with them at some point, so we do have a limit in there, because although that's effectively our current account as an organisation, it's money placed with that counterparty, which is why they appear on.
I remember having to declare an interest, because I worked in the bank at the time, and the guys were in the next desk putting the tender together for Dacorum Borough Council, and I had to move. I had to move away to the other end of the office just to make sure I wasn't any sort of influence, which I wasn't, because you got to play it. I remember that one.
Yes. We believe you, Councillor.
I'm sure you do. I know I was 6, that must have been 10 years ago. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Fiona.
Sorry, Councillor Davis.
He actually went to the pub. There is a paragraph here that worries me, and that's 3.3, looking at the Link Group interest rates view, and I think we gloss over that table at our peril, because that's the bit that is going to come back and bite us, whoever is in control of the council, because we're currently riding on a, shall we say, a relative crest of the wave, 5.55%, perhaps a little bit low. But that's going to come down fairly short order to 2.75, and then it's going to stick, and that will have an impact. And when you look at the bonus that we've actually got, or the benefit that we've actually accrued by the rates or the interest rates going up from 1.5% on PWLB up to what they are now, they will come back down. And that's where the squeeze will come.
Chair, if I can. If points well made, Councillor Darius. I think what I'd say in response to that is, in terms of our medium-term financial planning, we are not relying on bumper returns on our investments in the medium term to support us in terms of our financial sustainability, very much seen as a short-term benefit, and that's an approach that we are reflecting in our planning over the immediate and the medium term. Really, it's a lovely bonus to have. I think it will help us in terms of one-off projects that we want to deliver, or any particular issues we're having in this financial year and possibly next. But over the longer term, it's not a source of income that we're relying on to continue at current levels. It would be financially irresponsible, I think, to do so.
I would agree with Fiona, because we decided that a long time ago when I was full holder for it, because it was a bonus. It wasn't a sustainable situation to have bet on interest rates going up and down. So it was a nice thing to have, but as Fiona's pointed out, it's other sustainable income streams that we looked at. So
good point, well made. I only had a few questions. Page 86, section 4. I noticed that our investment strategy is pretty much it's security of capital, liquidity and return on investment, which are good things, good solid belt and braces sort of ways of managing your money. I thought, is there any scope for assessing the investment portfolio from an ethical point of view, or from a sustainability point of view? Or is that banned by Treasury?
I don't believe it's banned, but in terms of the principles of security, liquidity and yield, I mean, that is industry standard. It's expected of local government that's the order of priority that we take when we are placing the council's cash balances. Security paramount, it's public taxpayers' money or our tenants' money, effectively. We need to make sure there's good stewardship of those funds. Liquidity, we should always have access to it if we need it. And then finally, yield, the return. ESG, I think it's a developing area as far as local authority investments are concerned. I circulated some sort of initial thoughts to committee earlier today, but there are rating systems for the ESG characteristics of various investment products, and those are coming through. We have had some initial discussions with our Treasury management advisors. So you can get products that offer ESG credentials. They can and often are at a lower return than equivalent products that perhaps aren't considered to be as highly rated in ESG terms. Often those products actually require us to invest our cash balances for quite long periods. At the moment, we don't really invest beyond a year, just to maintain liquidity and so on. So there are those sort of considerations. I think it's also quite a difficult area to take an objective view on as well. Particularly around ethical type investments, because one person's ethical investment is not necessarily another. And sometimes a counterparty can have high ESG credentials, but actually on the ethical side, they perhaps aren't quite so robust or so good. So I think it's a difficult area. I think it's one we are looking at in more detail, as we've had a few questions come through from members on this. So it's kept under review, but at the moment, it's not something that we are actively looking to invest the council's cash balances in, specifically in ESG products.
Councillor Byrne?
Yes. On page 88, under item 7.2, there's a reference to the budgeted borrowing by the HRA. Presumably that's from the PWLB, is it?
It is, yes, that's right.
And is it short-term or long-term?
So just to clarify, this is the table at 7.2 HRA borrowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, apologies. So if I can just clarify the comment I've just made there. In terms of the borrowing, we have a number of options to us. So the Public Works Loan Board, the PWLB is one, but we can actually borrow from our own cash balances, and that is something we can do. And you do from the council's own cash balances that we have within the council.
So not just the HRA, but
the general fund as well. And if you do that, you tend to be able to do that at a preferential rate compared to a PWLB borrowing. So if we needed to do that, that's likely to be our first port of call for borrowing if it's thought to be the right decision. But clearly PWLB is also an option for us.
And I'm right in thinking that you can only borrow against capital projects rather than...
Correct, yeah. We can only borrow to finance our capital expenditure.
Okay, so fine. So is the budgeted borrowing from the Public Works Board, or you don't know, or is it from?
Our assumption would be it would be internal because that's the most cost-effective method of borrowing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to go back to the ESG stuff because I think it's a total policy. It's just a nice thing to have, and as I say, go woke, go broke, and as you say, they get a lower rate of interest, and it's one of these things that's fashionable now. 5 years' time, it will be gone because you know you're paying for all these consultants coming in and saying you're doing this properly, that properly, and yeah. So I think it's difficult to do that. Clearly, if we're investing in cash balances, we're not taking stakes in companies that are maybe things around the world that are not what we're able to do. We're investing in UK banks. So
No,
strategy. Yeah.
I must admit, I see security, liquidity, ROI.
Yeah, that's the three SIPFA
Really solid.
mandatory things that you have, and that's what you've got to comply with. Yeah.
And then, as you say, the list of banks. There's no Icelandic banks in there.
We never had.
Indonesians.
No.
Going,
No. Yeah, but
not I've got anything against Indonesia, but
we did have things floated us taking, maybe investing in foreign currency and all that sort of thing, which that's just a risk. You just don't do it.
then on page 86, section 5, I just asked a repeated question. What are we doing with all this funds we're getting from our savings? But I think that's been answered quite a few times. So I'm happy with that. And there were some negative estimate figures on page 93, row 5.
Yeah, we put those in to make sure that the committee is reading the reports.
Oh.
Those were typos, apologies. Yeah, we will make note to take out the negative signs in the next version of the update.
Thank you. Right, are there any other questions on the Treasury report? All looks safe and secure to me. Right. Apologies, I realise I skipped over the actions. Do we want to have a quick look at those before we take on AOB?
You mean the forward plan or the action plan?
Oh, no, just the actions at the start of the agenda. Sorry, I just skipped over them earlier on. At the back of the minutes. Yeah, on page 11 and 12, are you all comfortable with the actions and the responses to the actions?
Yeah, very comfortable. Thank you.
And then if we jump back down, sorry about that, I was in. Then in terms of the forward plan, we've got a meeting in February and March.
I have a suggestion for the forward plan.
Yes.
I think we should look at the leisure contract.
To do what? Sorry.
Well, I mean, it's something that I think the auditors should be looking at. I don't know whether it's.
Why would auditors look at it? It's a contract, so I think it should go to SPA, should it not? It's not something it's a legal document. And
Yeah,
clearly the finance team would know that if they're not delivering on that sort of thing. So I rather think it would not be
It's their performance that I'm interested in, but you might.
No, it's probably that way, John, because I think is a contractual obligation, but we'd just be looking at numbers coming in and all that sort of thing. And,
But it's not quite that, is it? Because as far as I can remember, the previous administration had actually to not exactly bail them out, but certainly let them off certain of their financial obligations temporarily.
No, not true. That was a case evidently during lockdown, and it was a case of just, there was no point in us going, pay us this, because when there's no income coming in, and it was clearly for the whole of everything active around the UK, so every other local authority. But and that was documented in the finance side, what we had to do, because we knew that they were paying us, they were due to pay us a certain amount every year, and clearly approached us, and there was a lot of conversations, as you can imagine. And we thought, well, what we're going to do, we either demand on it, the default on it, and then we'd have to take over the leisure centre. So, as you know, you were there.
Sure. It's just that I think we should be quite worried about the viability of that particular company at the moment.
Why?
I don't think that they've recovered the numbers. I'm not just talking about in Hemel that they had before. And so I'm not sure, it's I think it may provide quite a large risk. You may be right that SPA, it may be SPA that needs to look at it, or even F&R.
They've just won a new contract.
Yeah, but I'd be guided by Fiona, because she's...
Yeah, just a few comments on this, really. So we do have a review of the leisure contract in the internal audit plan for this year. So it's in there, and I know work has started on that already. So that is being looked at. So
That's for this year?
It's in the current year. So that should give some assurance in terms of leisure contract arrangements. We also, in terms of any financial implications, that's also brought before members if there are any concerns as part of our quarterly financial monitoring. So there's another opportunity for information in relation to those arrangements to be scrutinised from a financial perspective. So I'm comfortable that I think there is opportunity for members to look at the details of our leisure contract arrangements, and particularly for this committee as well, in terms of the internal audit review that's in the programme.
Right.
There's more so, John, you're talking about the contract, the legalese of it. I thought you were going on about, that.
Well, I'm not,
review that, but no,
I don't have all the information that I think it is anyway.
Sorry, yeah, I know, sorry. Okay.
I think the first point of stop for in the review of the contract would be with the relevant overview and scrutiny committee, and they would then, the way I would see it, which comes back, if you like, to the point I made right at the beginning, that they would then say, well, hold on a moment, the audit committee need to interrogate this in greater detail and with much more of a depth. That's the way I would see it.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if alarm bells are clanging away from the scrutiny committee, then we'll look to our auditors to do a thorough scrub. Unless there's any other questions, is there any other business? No. All right, have a fabulous Christmas, because we're meeting before.